Salutations, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland, and this video is going to be a debate, and the motion is this House would torture in extremis. So, as is always the case, I shall commence as the proposition. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen of the House, this House would torture in extremis for many reasons, and I shall outline them first before going back over them in greater depth, one by one. First of all, to save lives. Second of all, because all countries do this anyway, and it's just a question of how frequently they do it and under what circumstances. So we're seeking to regulate it. Third of all, because this is morally acceptable in the circumstances, and only a psychological gymnast would claim that killing civilians in a war is acceptable, but slapping a soldier never is. And lastly, because torture is humane. It may seem paradoxical, but all shall be revealed. So we need to do this to stop and to solve grave crimes. I'm not talking about shoplifting. It's only got to be used in the case of very serious crimes like murder or kidnap, and that would be true, or indeed in a war situation, and not to be used on all soldiers as a matter of routine. No. Only when it's to extract vital intelligence in a situation where time is a critical factor. So supposing the police arrest a terrorist and they know that a bomb is hidden somewhere and it's going to go off any minute, where is it? If he won't tell them, they're going to have to get nasty. Asking him politely isn't allowed. Take the United Kingdom. A police officer told me, in police interviews, the police are not even allowed to stand up while speaking to the person, just in case that's seen as intimidation. This is preposterous. Terrorist suspects in Northern Ireland being photographed. Sometimes they're going like this, so you couldn't see their face properly in the photo. The police weren't even allowed to force them to face the camera properly. This is ridiculous. Would the public stand for that? No, of course not. So we need to use just a little bit of force. And what I'm saying, twisting someone's arms behind their back, that's not going to do them any lasting damage. Kneeling on their chest, whatever it is, but things could have to get rough if they're not willing to talk. And if it really is a time-critical situation, if it comes to electric shocks, we're just going to have to do it. I know it's revolting. It's very distasteful to even think about, but someone is going to suffer. I would rather as an evil person than many good people. We're not going to kill him. I'm not asking for the death penalty, just to hurt him temporarily. All he has to do is play ball, and the suffering would end immediately. Because if he says, I don't know, well, he actually might not know. But if he says, I won't tell you, or won't even open his mouth, well, that's different. Clearly he knows. We could have lie detector tests going at the same time to make sure he's not feeding us misinformation. So torture can take all forms. It could be psychological as well as physical. We could just deprive a person of sleep. We're deprived of sleep at work all the time, or even flying. So that's not going to harm the person in the long run, because people find it very, very difficult to resist and get the truth out of them that way. Control the temperature, make it hot or cold or whatever it takes, but make a person stand for 24 hours to get the truth, to save lives. Someone has been kidnapped, held in a dungeon somewhere, could die any moment. We have to find that person. We have to save the innocent person's life. If that means hurting an evil person just a little bit, of course, it's morally imperative that we do so. And only someone who's got no sense of right and wrong, no sense of proportion, would say, oh no, this absolutely wicked person must never be harmed, even though innocent people will die in their thousands. So we'd have a rule that only a police officer above a certain level can authorise it, and he or she will be open to prosecution if they authorise it when they shouldn't have done. There'll be some sort of ethical guidelines. Now, I know it's tricky. There's some cases where they should definitely authorise it. There's some cases where they definitely shouldn't. And then there's a grey area. So the grey area, the presumption would have to be towards the police officer, or indeed in a military situation, a military officer above a certain rank. Obviously, we'd offer superb medical care to those who've just been tortured. And we also have the courage to call torture by its proper name, not to be merely mouthed and say inhuman and degrading treatment. We're talking about torture, whether psychological or physical, whatever it takes to save innocent life. So when we arrest people, we sometimes get hurt, bruised, broken bones. All right, so you're willing to accept that, unless you say we have no arrests, we should have no police whatsoever. Why won't you accept torture under certain circumstances? This might be very, very rare. We're not talking about the average suspect. We're talking about the worst of the worst, people who are egregiously wicked. So absolute villains might have to be tortured sometimes to save countless innocent lives. What if it was your life at stake? What if it was your family who might get blown up? Come on, come off it. Tell the truth. You would authorize torture. And anyone who says that he would not is lying. So you have to face up to the hideous truth sometimes. Now, we fight wars as collateral damage. That could mean huge numbers of civilians are killed, right? This will reduce civilian deaths on both sides if we can target the enemy more accurately. It will end the war sooner. Torture happens anyway. Every country does this if they're really pushed to it. So when push comes to shove, we're going to torture. What we're going to do is regulate it, reduce it, make sure that the suffering is not excessive, it's not unduly cruel. Obviously, it's got to involve infliction of some pain, otherwise we wouldn't get people to talk. But it cannot be sadism. People cannot be doing it for kicks. We'd have to psychologically screen people who are going to torture. Those are not going to go beyond what's necessary. How about nuclear weapons? Many people on the other side would be in favour of nuclear weapons. So you would fry clothes into skin. You would incinerate entire metropolises, but you wouldn't slap an evil man in the face? This is beyond absurd, all right? There comes a time when torture is called for. It's absolutely warranted under particular circumstances. You might say, but if we authorize this, then our soldiers will be tortured when they fall into enemy hands. That happens anyway, especially fighting ISIS and the Taliban. So it's not going to make it any worse. It's not like they have any respect for international law or humanitarianism. So for all the reasons I've outlined, torture actually is humane. It reduces suffering, doesn't increase it. And I know it's disgusting, but people have to do their duty however unpalatable it is. And that is the harsh reality. So you need to face facts and stop being so mealy-mouthed. Stop shrinking away from the ugly truth. And for the reasons I've already outlined, I beg to propose. Right, so now I am the other side, I'm the opposition. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen of the House, we're against torture under all circumstances for the following reasons. First of all, it's morally unacceptable, it's illegal, and it's ineffectual. Moreover, it brutalizes the torturer as much as the tortured, and it would simply spread and spread till it became absolutely par for the course. So it's different killing someone in combat when he or she is a threat to you. A prisoner is under your control, is disarmed, is often chained up or whatever, locked up, and is no threat to you. So you're hurting an absolutely helpless and defenseless person, and there is clear blue water there. There is a distinct moral difference there. So it's also ineffective. They would feed you junk information. Why would you believe it? They'll say anything to abate the agony. So we know there's the Convention Against Torture, Inhuman and Degrading Treatment, passed in 1979, signed by almost every sovereign state, ratified by almost every sovereign state. The International Criminal Court jails people for torture. So it's absolutely repugnant that anyone should advocate for this when every government worth the name prosecutes people for torture. And it's the height of hypocrisy to say, ooh, we're the goodies because we don't do this, and the Taliban and Al-Qaeda do, but then you're advocating torture against them. No. Human rights are for humans, all humans. And it's true that some terrorist organizations break these, but that's not to say that we should throw out our own moral standards, and then there would just be a race to the bottom on ethics. We would slide back into a new dark age of savagery and cruelty. So torture is barbaric. Under any situation whatsoever, it's completely impermissible. So there are medical ethics as well, and obviously we can't have doctors involved in this, giving people truth serums or whatever, and then you go too far if you weren't doing it under medical supervision and kill people. Dead men tell no tales. You wouldn't get any information on someone you've accidentally killed. Laws of war forbids this. The Geneva Convention, the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, signed by every sovereign state, ratified by almost every one of them, completely outlaws it under no circumstances. As the Convention Against Torture says, no matter how grave the threat to the life of the nation, torture is unacceptable, right? There is no excuse, ever. And I know there's been a bit of backsliding on this, things like waterboarding brought in by the United States. And the Israeli government does it. All right, I've got to hand it to them. They are at least honest. They tell the truth about what they do. Many countries do worse and lie about it. So I spoke to two American soldiers separately who'd served in Iraq at the height of the conflict. And fascinatingly, it was only speaking to me, nobody else around to impress, they were both adamantly against torture, saying it's completely ineffectual, and they would just feed you disinformation. They would blab anything, any nonsense, just to stop you hurting them. So not only is it immoral, it's also ineffective. And you'd be going to the wrong place. You wouldn't be finding the enemy or the weapons cache. So torture, it brutalizes the torturer. He becomes desensitized to wickedness, to the infliction of undue suffering, and it just gets worse and worse on both sides. We'd end up with absolute sadism, with the most unspeakable atrocities committed on a huge scale. And the definition of when it's acceptable, when it's urgent, would get wider and wider. You said for rape, not just kidnapping and murders. You would be beating people into false confessions. It'd be for any crime. It'd be for bank robbery. It'd be for theft. It'd be for whatever. And it'd get to the situation where a child who stole some sweets would be tortured too. So this is the thin end of the wedge. The only thing to do is to stop it now, have an absolute, unbreachable moral principle, no torture under any circumstances at all. And what high-rank police officer should authorize it? What high-rank army officer should authorize it? It would go down and down and down and down the chain of command. If you're talking about these urgent situations, these ticking bomb scenarios, they don't have time to go to the general and get permission. They need to do it now, and they would act on their own initiative, as soldiers are supposed to do. So people will be torturing others just for kicks. You can see how it would really degrade our morality, and we'd all be completely unethical and utterly vicious. So I don't want us to become beasts. We're humans. And people will be tortured into false confessions. It could be you who gets tortured into a false confession. It could be you who's arrested, accused of a crime that you did not commit. And then the police say, we're getting results, we're clearing this up. Oh, we know he did it. Well, we're fairly sure who he did it, so we'll just fabricate a bit of evidence. It's a good cause anyway. So when law enforcement breaks the law in the name of the law, there is no law. And it's true that Al-Qaeda and so on torture people, but if you start doing this, then even more people are going to get tortured. And in a conventional war against an army that abides by the Geneva Convention, they'll say, if you're going to throw out the Geneva Convention, we're going to throw it out. And it would just lead to the general lowering of moral standards and the brutalization of society. So for all the reasons I've already outlined, I beg to oppose.